All right, out of respect to everyone's time, we'll get started. My name is Andy Crisafulli. I'm the athletic director here at Dartmouth High School. I'm entering my 5th year in this role in Dartmouth. Before Dartmouth, I held the same position at Joseph Case High School in Swansea for 7 years. So, we're starting year 12 as an athletic director, and I enjoy every minute of it. So I do welcome you in joining us tonight. This is one of the, if not the most important night of the fall season, to make sure that we are sharing very important information with families. There is so much detail, so many things to share over the course of a season. This is the one piece of communication that kind of kickstarts us for a great beginning of the season. So again, thank you so much for attending. So our virtual presentation, our ground rules will be, everyone's going to be muted during the entire presentation. We will use the chat area for questions or comments. So if there are questions and or comments that do come up during the presentation, please feel free to utilize the chat area that should be on your screen. And that's how we'll answer questions that you may have. Questions will be addressed at the end of the presentation, and the final bullet is we are recording live. So when my message to families did mention the recording of this presentation, so that it is readily available for families that weren't able to attend tonight to make sure they review information. So, sure everyone's muted. Okay, so our goals of tonight's presentation is to provide an overview of the Dartmouth High School athletic program for prospective fall student athletes. It's to review policies, procedures, and expectations associated with athletics at Dartmouth High School and participation in the MIAA, and to provide information in an effort to avoid conflicts, problems, and answer questions concerning our athletic season. So our athletic department contact information slide, and as I mentioned, this presentation will be available to you, so don't feel the need that you have to begin to write things down quickly. But myself, as the athletic director, my email address is on this slide. Our athletic secretary is Dolores Constelletti. She's the individual that will be answering mostly, if not all, of your phone calls when they do come in, if you have any questions. We have our athletic trainer who's actually with us tonight, Kathleen Thornton, who is back with us. She was our athletic trainer 7 years ago. Chelsea Borowski was our athletic trainer the last 6 years. And Chelsea has moved on to a different athletic trainer position at the collegiate level. And so we're excited to have Kathy back, and she's going to be speaking to the group tonight in her slide, talking about information with the medical piece. So our 3 governing bodies for our high school athletic program. The first one is the MIAA. For those who do not know the MIAA, it's a high school athletic association, again in Massachusetts, that Dartmouth High School is a member of in good standing. And with its membership, the principal athletic department agreed to abide by all of the rules and regulations of that organization. So in addition to our handbook, we follow the MIAA's handbook also. So Dartmouth High School is a proud member of the Southeast Conference, which is a conference of 5 schools that are pretty local: Brockton, Bridgewater, Rainham, Durfee, and New Bedford. Dartmouth is the smallest of the 5, but extremely competitive athletically within that grouping. And the SEC is governed by its own constitution, and it's along with following the rules and regulations of the MIAA. And finally, Dartmouth High School. So in addition, additional policies, regulations, and rules are set by our school committee, superintendent, and high school principal. And under those guidelines, the local communities are allowed to set additional policies, rules, and regulations as long as they are not less restrictive than those stipulated by the MIAA. An example that I will give you is our academic eligibility standard is more challenging than the baseline MIA standard. So our philosophy and overview of our athletic department and the overall goal. Academics is our top priority, number 1. Our kids aim to be the best students as well as athletes. They're developing values of patience, courage, integrity, and inner strength. Handle adversity appropriately and cope with adversity. Handle victory appropriately and cope with adversity. And finally, develop awareness of teamwork, sportsmanship, and unselfishness. So our overall goal is to strive to compete with poise in class and be great representatives of our town. So our standard, our kids, student athletes are held to a high standard. They're expected to be role models and great ambassadors and representatives of our school and town. Not only do they represent us in our home facilities here in Dartmouth, but they do represent our school while we're traveling on the road. So not only is it very important to hold to that high standard, and again, it's something that we want to make sure that Dartmouth High School is looked in a very positive light. And we ask the kids not to do anything to embarrass themselves, their family, or their school. So our participation requirements, which, if you are on this phone call, you have done the first bullet, which is register on family ID. Registration happens 3 times a year, once for each season. You should have a current physical on file. There are many physicals that are in Aspen within our nursing department. I know with incoming freshmen, there are many that are bringing them in hand already, and hopefully if they do owe us an updated physical, they will bring it their first day to begin the clearance process. And the final one is being academically eligible, and we'll talk about our academic standards in just a moment. But if you are an incoming freshman to Dartmouth High School, you are automatically eligible for the first season of the year, which is the fall, until the report cards after term 1 are published. All right, so our handbook is, please make sure to read it. It is very detailed. It was passed by our school committee last August, right around this time. It can be found linked to our athletic department website. Now, in just a moment, we'll go over some of the bigger rules that do come up often, but there are so many other very important details in that athletic handbook. Please make sure you make an effort to review that and to read it. All right, so department rules, and these are the big ones. As I mentioned, these are the ones that do appear quite often during a school year, is our daily attendance, our academic eligibility, our bona fide team member rule, which is an MIAA rule, our chemical health violation, which is an MIA rule, and finally, hazing, bullying, and any other type of inappropriate behavior. So we have a slide for each one of these to explain them. So daily attendance, school starts at 7:30 in the morning and ends at 2:03. So in order for a student to be eligible to participate in athletics and/or any other extracurricular activity, they must attend at least a half day of school, which is 3 hours and 15 minutes. Now, that can be a combination of a variety of different class periods. I do know that there are times when students leave for appointments and they do check in and come back. So it's very tough to say you have to be in this certain time or you have to stay to that certain time. As long as your combined attendance in this building is 3 hours and 15 minutes, you would be eligible. Now, there are excused absences and times that are detailed in the student handbook here at Dartmouth High School, and I encourage you to review them because whether you have doctor's appointments or driving tests, those are all under the umbrella of excuse, but the communication piece from the families is extremely important to make sure that they have record of that. So our building administrative assistants can make those tweaks and changes on our daily attendance. So our academic eligibility, in order to be academically eligible, you have to earn a passing grade of 65 in a minimum of 5 classes at the time of the most recent marking period. So the marking period, which would be term 1, will start at the very first day of school and will close at the beginning of November, and then report cards will be published. I believe it's the end of the 2nd week of November to deem eligibility moving forward into term 2. So for the fall season or the fall period in which we're walking into now, a returning high school student must earn a passing grade of 65 in a minimum of 5 classes that met during semester 2 of the previous school year. So that only applies to our returning student athletes. As I mentioned, incoming freshmen are eligible for the first term before we redo eligibility after first term. Report cards are published. So our bona fide team member rule, and again, this is an MIAA rule, and this is a very, very important one. A bona fide member of a school team are precluded from missing high school practice or competition in order to participate in a non-school athletic activity event in a sport recognized by the association. So, so basically, I'll give you an example. If you are on a soccer team and you have a travel baseball or a travel softball game, you cannot not attend Dartmouth High School practice and or game to attend that other activity. And if that does happen, then there's a penalty for that, and the penalty would be a 1-game suspension for the first offense, and then it would gradually add games if there was a second or third offense. Like I said, everything is very detailed within our student athlete handbook. But basically, once you sign up and you're a competing member of one of our Dartmouth High School teams, Dartmouth High School is your #1 priority, and everything secondary in sports and any other teams that kids may play on, they cannot attend those practices and miss our practices and or games. The final one is chemical health, which is another MIA rule. And it says from the earliest fall practice date to the conclusion of the academic year, a student shall not, regardless of quantity, possess, buy or sell or give away beverages containing alcohol, tobacco products, e-cigarettes, cigarettes, vape pens, and similar devices, marijuana. Again, luckily, this is not something that comes up very often, which, obviously our kids are extremely committed, and families have done a great job of making sure that we're promoting good health, but it does happen at times. So if a student athlete is in that position, there's a gradual penalty to that. The first offense would be 25% of the game season that they're in, and then progressively would get a higher percentage if it happened a second time or a third time during the school year. So again, not something that we really have to deal with a lot. They do come up, but again, I'm hoping that collectively we are promoting, great health and wellness with our student athletes. Last one is hazing and bullying or any other kind of inappropriate behavior. Dartmouth forbids hazing, bullying, or any other type of inappropriate behavior. We abide by the established laws, and we'll follow authorized protocols and procedures. So again, luckily this again is not a topic that is common here at Dartmouth High School, but we do ask the kids that if you see something, say something, and that's kids, that's coaches, those are families, those are administrators, and many of the times, if not all the time, if something can be caught very early in the process, it's a lot easier to handle than if it's allowed, to progress and snowball. So we do ask, if you see something or hear something, please make sure to say something. Okay, so school communication. We communicate at minimum in 4 different ways. We have our email, which is through Aspen. So most of the communications that I've sent out this summer through the athletic department have been Aspen. This particular communication for this meeting, I just emailed families who registered for fall sports. But again, the majority of the communication is through Aspen and Aspen email. If you are, I encourage you to please check your Aspen to make sure that all of the email accounts that are under your family are current and active, and you're actively checking them, because like I said, that's a great avenue that we use for communication. We do have a newsletter, Between the Lines, which we'll talk about in just a moment, that blasts out so much information during the seasons. And I do ask that you take the time to read and review. We do spend a lot of time adding lots of different pieces of information to it. And so I really encourage families to really read it and not kind of skim over it, because there's so many different pieces of information that's important to know. Twitter, we have at Dartmouth Athletics. Dart Athletics, and our website, which is biggreensports.org. It has our team schedules, and it's actually linked to this program called the Arbiter. And the Arbiter is where all of our seasonal sports schedules are located. All right, so this is our website homepage, and it is it's filled with lots of information. I'm hoping that you have been on this website and begun to explore all the information that is on there. At the very top of the screen, a screen of your home and your team schedule, sports registration, athletic user fee, which we'll talk about in just a moment. Then we have our quick links down the left. We have our athletic newsletters on the bottom left, important information. We put on there the incoming freshman athletic department presentation slideshow. That's a presentation that I hosted on, I believe it was the 7th of June, for any incoming freshman family for information about our athletic program. And then we have our athletic department newsletter that went out towards the end of June that has all of our fall information in there. And then there's a little cheat sheet that we put together. It says Fall Athletics First Day, and it talks about the day, the location, what the student athletes will need, contact information for the coaches. So again, we try to kind of hit it from a lot of different angles to make sure that we are communicating effectively with families. On the right, you'll see our Twitter feed, and Facebook is right below. At this point, we don't have a Facebook account. That is something that I'm attempting to work on to be able to get that extra line of communication to families. All right, Between the Lines is our athletic department newsletter. Again, I'm hoping that you were able to review the one that was sent at the end of June because it had many, many details about the beginning of our fall season. We established this in 2020. So, when we were sort of in the middle towards the end of the pandemic, this is a tool that we began to use in athletics that would really push out lots of information about our programming and the COVID guidelines and all the things pertaining to that time in our lives. But we've been able to sustain what we established in 2020, and I think selfishly it's a great tool, something that I really enjoy doing for families. And again, it's done through a program called SMORE, and it is shared via email, social media platforms, and put on our website. So direct communication with student athletes. So you're talking about student athletes and coach communication. So this is our district policy. There's 3 different avenues: school email, Google Classroom, and a program called Parent Square, which is a new program that the school department is going to be rolling out at the very beginning of this school year. I've been actually on the app itself, and I think families are going to really, really enjoy it. I think it's a great tool to keep everyone informed of different things that are going on in our building, whether it's academics or extracurricular. But Parent Square is going to be a lot of heavy communication coming from that. So there's no texting and messaging through personal cell phones. No direct communication with student athletes through social media outlets with Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. And again, these are things that we put in place to protect both parties. Okay, so our fall practice schedule, or our practice schedule is the fall. It is updated and subject to change. Again, things change with facilities and weather. But this is a spreadsheet that is all of our sports in the season, every day, broken down by levels, what time the practice starts, what time it ends, and the location. So this is one of the better things that we've done in the athletic program in the last 2 years. So one of the things that we try to avoid is parents not being informed and trying to guess if and when there's practice, when it begins, when it ends, what's the location. So I do ask coaches to stay as close to 2 weeks ahead as possible with this, so families can plan as needed. But this is linked right to our website, right on the left view on the home page where it says fall practice schedule, and it is up there right now. It's about a week and a half into the season, and it's something that will continue to build over the next 3 to 5 days. So everyone has access to it, and I highly encourage you, to continue to visit it. So families are very well informed. Okay, user fees. So there's a $50 user fee to participate in the season. We're not going to be collecting the user fee until final rosters are submitted. And the reason for that is if there is a cut or there are cuts, we try to avoid the reimbursement piece, because the reimbursement piece to families does take a while. It is done through our town hall, and there is a whole process. So, we try to hold off to collect user fees until rosters are submitted. I do know and can appreciate some people have already paid. But like I said, we'll notify families when we're looking to collect the fee if the fee hasn't been paid. And the user fee payment does not guarantee playing time. So that's something that we need to keep in the forefront of our minds also. All right, so medically, we have Kathleen Thornton, as I mentioned, is our athletic trainer. She is contracted through South Coast Hospitals. Kathy is not new to Dartmouth long-term, but is new for this year for us in the short term. And I am going to option pitch it over to her to talk about the medical piece of our operation.
Good evening, everyone. As Andy said, I was here at Dartmouth for the last time we won the Super Bowl. So I think that was 2015. And some of you may recognize my face either from being around the South Coast and covering at various high schools over the last 34 years, but I've also been doing per diem coverage, usually up at the stadium for baseball, softball, soccer, things like that over the last 6 years or so. So you may have seen me around. For those of you who don't know what an athletic trainer is, quick synopsis, I'm there to basically take care of all the medical needs for any of your student athletes. They get injured, I will do an evaluation, I can do treatment, we work on injury prevention and things of that nature. If your athlete has any concerns, or if you have any concerns, injury concerns about your child, please don't hesitate to reach out to me. I'm a big fan of communication, both from me to you and from you to me. So if you have any concerns, anything you need me to take a peek at, just feel free to email me and let me know, and I can take care of that for you. So next, we're just going to talk quickly about injuries. So as I just said, injured athletes, I tend to be the one that sees them, and I will evaluate them and sometimes treat them. I would love to tell you I can reach out on every single little thing I say, but it is just so crazy in the training room sometimes that's not feasible. But what I can tell you is if your athlete has something significant, they have a significant ankle sprain, they're coming home on crutches, they're splinted, there's an injury that's going to keep them out for any length of time or that may need to be seen, I will definitely reach out to you. The things I may not be able to reach out on are, your little bumps and bruises, a blister here or there, a little bit of a soreness, things like that. But again, if you have any concerns, if they come home and they're complaining about something at night, please just reach out to me and I can fill you in on what we found. If there is, I try to encourage the kids to see me when things are small, and I would hope that you as parents also would, because it is much, much easier to take care of an injury when it is small and get rid of it and keep them on the field the whole time, rather than it getting more significant, for example, a tendonitis, let's say, and having them miss time. Our goal is to keep them on the field if we can. As far as clearances, if a child sees a physician for an injury or illness during the season, they need to be medically cleared. So just get a note from the physician letting us know that they are still okay for sports participation. And that's obviously for any type of thing that they will see the physician for, because any type of injury or illness sometimes can come with restrictions from the physician. And if they're coming back from injury, keep in mind whether it be an injury that happened during the season or an injury that happened prior. Let's say maybe they broke their leg last season or had an ACL reconstruction. We do need a note from their physician, NP, or PA clearing them for participation. And also if they have any particular restrictions or things that they would like us to keep an eye on or limit them, that would also need to be on the note also. And then what will usually happen, just to keep you informed, is that if an athlete's coming back, especially for a long-term injury, usually they're not jumping right back into game situations. So we're going to determine, what their return to play progression is based on their abilities, conditioning levels, confidence in the injury, and things of that nature. Next up is the dreaded COVID-19 that everybody no longer wants to hear about. We follow the American Academy of Pediatrics guidelines on COVID return, which basically says that an athlete should have a return to play note from the physician. They do not have to see them. Over the last couple of years, I have covered at multiple schools. Most physicians will just send a note on saying, yep, they had COVID, they're fine. If they had no symptoms or very minimal symptoms, as soon as they're cleared, they're right back into play. There's somebody who has more significant symptoms, they had significant respiratory involvement, they had high fevers for a week. In that particular case, we usually do a little bit of a graded return, which is literally just they do some activity on their own, they do a practice, and then maybe we can get them back into much more significant activity, such as games. And all that is to just make sure that they're not suffering any cardiac or respiratory symptoms after having COVID. And in some cases, if somebody's had moderate COVID, they've been out for a week or two, sometimes even 3 or 4, so their conditioning level isn't where it should be. So just like any athlete who'd been out sick with any illness, we may be ramping them up a little slower. Next up is physicals. Please remember your physicals are good for 13 months to the day. So the day after that 13 months, the child is considered ineligible by MIA regs. So you want to make sure that you have that physical scheduled prior to the 13 months being up. With that being said, the MIA also specifically forbids what we call a gap note. Those notes that say the athlete is fine to play, they have a physical in a month. It can't say anything like that. They don't take anything like that, or they don't accept that. So on the physicals, you just have to make sure it says it was a physical exam, the date of the physical or the date of the exam, not just the date it was signed, and that they are cleared to play sports. So that's what we're looking for on the physicals. Also, if your child is followed for any type of a chronic illness, say epilepsy, or they may have cardiac issues or things like that, if they see a specialist for something, we also need a clearance note from the specialist, because what happens is sometimes, as you know, the specialist may have a little bit different take on it than a primary care, and they're the higher authority on those particular individual conditions. And that's once a year. So it's not like you have to get one for every season. As long as you have it at the beginning of the year or the first season that your child plays, that covers you for the rest of the year. Some of you have reached out via email. So if I notice it, I will reach out to remind you. But if you remember also, you can just submit it in with the physical. Let's see, what else? So next up is going to be head injury protocol. So we follow the mass regulations for concussions in school sports. We have absolutely no leeway on this. It is a state law and regs, and we have to follow what has been outlined for us by the legislature and Mass DPH. So to return post head injury, if your child was diagnosed with a concussion, they need a physician note clearing them for return, and it needs to be on the state form. The state form needs to be filled out. That is available on the Mass DPH website, but I also have copies also. And most of the time, if I know an athlete's going to see their doc, I'll hand them that form and just say, remember, that needs to be filled out, or I'll email it to the parent sometime. They also, as part of the regulations, have to complete a gradual return to play, which is a 6-step process. First step being minimal activity, last step being full game play. And we take them through that regardless of what the physician indicates. The physician, unfortunately, in this particular case, can't say that they don't have to do a gradual return for a concussion unless it's been done obviously in the past. It's a concussion that happened a month ago, but anything current, we need to put them through that. We can't shorten it. We can't skip steps. So just so that you know on that. And in order to start the gradual return, the regs are they have to be no longer using any academic accommodations. So no resting, no altered tests, no, less homework. They have to be back to full academic activity, and they have to be symptom free. So those are the criteria for return. And they have to have be back to baseline for sway testing, which I'll talk about in just a minute. And then just keep in mind also the school basically has the kind of the last say on how fast the athlete comes back. In other words, we can't let them come back any faster, but sometimes we may need to slow that athlete down if they've been out for an extended period of time. It might be maybe their conditioning level isn't where it needs to be, or maybe their confidence level for the sport they're playing isn't there. So it may be an extra day or two, but that's something that would be discussed with the parent and would be done in conjunction. So it's not something that's going to be done unilaterally. So we'll definitely keep in contact with you for your athletes who have sustained concussions. For those of you who don't know, we do sway testing. I think they started doing that a couple of years ago. Some of your athletes have already done the sway testing. We had 3 dates earlier this week. We will be scheduling further dates for sway testing as the season goes on and as the teams are chosen. For those of you who don't know, it's a test that is done on the phone. It basically just tests your balance, your reaction time, and memory and things of that nature. Your athlete goes through, they do the test, it gets saved, so it's there for us to compare post-injury. So if they sustain a concussion, we put them through a sway test after their injury to make sure they are back to functioning at base level. Sway testing, just like impact that was used prior to that, which some of you probably know, it is not the be all end all. It is not the last thing that decides anything. However, it does have to be back to baseline, just like all the other things like symptoms and activity level and academic level. Next up, the heat policy. So we follow the MIAA heat policy. We're going to measure the wet bulb temp prior to activity beginning for any of the teams, and periodically throughout the day as conditions warrant. On a 60-degree day, not out there measuring. On a 90-degree day or an 80-degree day, we'll be out there much more frequently. There's water available, and there'll be ice available for the athletes, and if we need it in case of an emergency. And the activity is limited as per the policy. That if you ever want to know, look on the MIA website, and they have it pretty well mapped out on what you can do at what particular wet bulb temperatures is what we look at. So luckily for us, it looks like we are going to have decent weather next week. It's looking like we're probably in the 70s, but they are talking about it being humid, and it doesn't take a scorcher and a lot of heat in some cases for athletes to suffer from heat cramps or heat exhaustion and even heat stroke, because it's about not being able to cool down, and humidity makes it more difficult for athletes to cool down. So just kind of keep that in mind. And that hydrating is very important. So if you could help us as staff at school and the coaches, remind your athletes to hydrate, especially before and after practice, because most of these athletes are chronically slightly dehydrated anyways, because they don't drink a lot of fluids. So we just want to make sure that they stay hydrated, because it lessens muscle injuries, but it also lessens the risk of obviously dehydration and lessens the risk of heat illness. So we just want to make sure. And then one other plea I'm going to make here is please help to encourage your athletes not to take the 5-hour energy or any type of energy drink before they go to practice. Especially those things artificially raise your blood pressure, not your blood pressure, they raise your heart rate, they will raise your body temperature, which can make you prone to heat illness. So what we want to make sure is that the kids aren't getting themselves in trouble just because they had 2 monsters to drink before they came to practice that day. We don't want to increase any reasons to have a heat illness for them. Last things I need to touch on, athletic insurance. So athletic insurance is a secondary policy that is through athletics. It is for athletic injuries that usually will cover anything that your private insurance doesn't cover. Parents are responsible for getting and submitting the forms, and if you need to, you can either reach out to me and I can point you in the right direction, or you can reach out to Dolores Consoletti, her email address is, you've probably seen it because she's probably sent you emails, and you can contact her at the athletic department number. And finally, what I want to say is just remember, I'm here to try to keep your kids on the field, not off the field. A lot of people are under the misconception that athletic trainers are bad things to see because they want to keep them off the field, or they tend to keep them off the field. I've been doing this a long time, and my first thing is to try to keep them on the field doing whatever it is that we can keep them doing, keep them active. So just please, if there's something going on that you're concerned about or that your athlete's complaining about every time they come home, encourage them to come in and see me when it's little so we can, clear that up, get them back to practicing fully. And as Andy had said, feel free to reach out to me at any point in time. My email address is right there on that slide, and I will be happy to talk to anyone at any point. Thanks.
Thank you, Kathy. All right. Next slide. Okay, so conflict resolution. So we'll roll right from Kathy to the conflict resolution piece and guidelines for parent and coach communication. And I'm actually going to forward it one slide because most of the conflict resolution is playing time and or status in a program. So I'm just going to spend a moment on sharing with the group the athletic department and athletic director's stance with playing time and or status in a program. All right, those topics are determined using a wide variety of measurements. Obviously, playing skills is one of many different tools that coaches use in determining playing time and status in a program and who plays what position, who plays at what levels. There's many other factors as to, fit within the program, needs at a certain position, types of practices that they have. Some student athletes practice really well, while some might not practice as well. So there's, different types of behavior within the group. So there are so many different types of measurements that are used to determine playing time. So from an athletic director's standpoint, I do not coach any of these teams in the fall. Therefore, I am not selecting who is on which team, who plays at which level, who plays what position, what plays are called, what formations are used, what offensive and defensive plays the team is using, the different types of philosophy that coaches do have. I'm not involved in any of that piece of the operation. We hire our coaching staffs to make those decisions. So as far as, again, playing time and status in the program, one of the things that we really want to encourage is our student athletes advocating for themselves and being able to learn how to approach, adults, coaches, and initiate those conversations if they do have those issues and those problems. Because again, ultimately, we're developing them, to be very smart, well-rounded, productive human beings beyond Dartmouth High School. So I do ask that, families do allow those conversations to happen, but there is a protocol that we do have in place in our athletic handbook that's pretty detailed concerning conflict resolution. And I am a firm believer that effective and early communication can solve many, many of the issues that will come up. So I do encourage families to have great communication. And I do encourage families to also allow their student athletes the opportunity to advocate for themselves and to solicit some of those difficult conversations. All right, so fan and spectator expectations. So last year, this is a policy that we put in place. As I mentioned, it's approved by our school department and our school committee. So when you're visiting one of our facilities or on the road, we ask that you cheer for Dartmouth and our student athletes and not belittle opposing teams, coaches, and or officials. I do understand in sports can get quite emotional, but I do ask that before things begin to snowball and spiral and go sideways, that we take a deep breath and remember this is high school sports. This is for our student athletes, and this is an experience for them, in the educational athletic realm. So I do ask that we follow that. And we also want to have a great reputation throughout the state of Massachusetts as to how not only our student athletes handle themselves, but also our fans and our spectators. Now, if there is an ejection from a game, either home or away. So, I'm at games, I have staffing that are hired to work games. You know, if I am not the individual that approaches someone and a staff member is, that staff member has the authority that I would have at that event. And if someone is asked to leave, we're going to be following the protocol that our student athletes have to follow if they are ejected or removed from a game, which is, again, first offense is a 2-game suspension and a parent course, sportsmanship course by the National Federation. And the second offense would be suspended for a calendar year. Now, again, this is something that was put in last year. We're very, very excited to say and report that we didn't have to put this in play last year. There was no one that we really had to visit this expectation with. So we're looking to continue that good pattern. But we do ask that our spectators and fans follow the same rules that our student athletes who are participating have to follow. So again, same MIA policy as our student athletes have to follow. All right, social media. Social media is another piece that, again, if not handled appropriately or respectfully, can spiral out of control. And that's not only social media with our student athletes, that's social media with families. I do understand and can appreciate there's a lot of different web pages on Facebook that everyone has their own opinion on things. And again, that's everyone is right. But I do ask before, if there is some frustration in the post that you're about to press send on, that you really take a breath and reread it and say and ask yourself, is this something that's going to help and or hurt the situation? It's the same thing we ask of our student athletes, and I think it's important for us as adults to model this. So again, we do ask that from the social media standpoint, we stay respectful and you know, and are able to set forth that positive example for our kids. Okay, so in summary, we ask for families and kids to be prepared, recognize that student athletes are held to a high standard, be aware. Like I said, if you see something, say something. If something doesn't look right, please say something. Resolve conflicts at the lowest level possible, and effective communication solves most issues. Represent our school and town with class and respect. Pay our user fee when we send that message out soliciting it, and then enjoy the high school athletic experience because it's going to fly by. So the slide that we put in for this year is the privilege versus the right. And again, this is another piece that we are going to be talking with our student athletes on the various teams. You know, in order to participate in interscholastic athletics, student athletes must understand that it's a privilege to represent our school, town, family, and community. It is not a right. So, you know, again, the mindset of it being a privilege to wear a Dartmouth High School uniform and understand that the name on the front means so much more than the name on the back. I think that is a very, very important lesson to drill home to our kids. And again, this is an educational athletics experience. And we as administrators, coaches, adults have to partner with families to make sure that our kids, you know, are learning these valuable lessons as they progress through high school. All right, so team meetings. So head coaches from each of our program will be in contact with student athletes and families about a sport-specific meeting opportunity. So basically, tonight's meeting is the overview athletic program, talking about the fall season. Each one of our programs is going to have host their own meeting for sports-specific information. And it'll be scheduled between now and the first regular season competition, which is somewhere for most teams around the end of the first week of September. So please be looking out for that. Our fall coaching staff, our sports are listed on the left, our head coach and then assistant coaches. Like I said, we are very, very fortunate to have such a strong collective coaching staff, with the majority of our coaches work within the Dartmouth Public Schools, which they are professional educators, and not all schools have that. We are very fortunate that we do. But like I said, our head coaches and assistants are located on this slide. Their contact information is also on our website. And then finally, questions for the chat. So I'm going to stop sharing. I am going to